Good morning. Jamie's working on a laptop? No. Oh, turn on the subtitles. Turn on the closed captioning. See what I really said or what I didn't say. Good morning. Welcome back to the Sunday morning Bible study. We continue our life of Christ. We are approaching the final week of Christ's life, not of the class. That's good. The final week was that 25% of the Gospels is something like that, because I think we're going to be in John 11, 12, and I think John goes like 22 chapters, so it covers half of John basically. So, anywho, continue to study life of Christ. My sources: I use a chronological study of the life of Jesus, Gene Taylor. We use that mainly for an outline, believe it or not. Fourfold Gospel by J.W. McGarvey. It's old, but it's pretty neat. It's got some neat stuff in it. That's the de facto order that a lot of people change the order. Some of it's tough when you start looking at some of the accounts and stuff, put them in an order. That's what we were using for an order. And padfield.com's got a lot of resources. Two other things I use a lot of Bible Gateway to copy and paste my scriptures. Bible Gateway's got a lot of different versions of the Bible. I typically use the ESV, but when I do study right, I usually put a couple versions on at the same time to see how parallel they are. So that it's a good source if you ever are blessed to have to put together a PowerPoint and teach Bible class. I recommend Bible Gateway. So I also use something called Study Light. Study Light's got a lot of commentaries on it. Coppins is on there, and McHarvey's is on there too. Those are ones I primarily use, but you don't have to. Chronological study of the life of Jesus. We're in chapter 19. For Chuck and I's own personal reference, I'm going to start chapter 19. I'm going to look at Jesus arrives in Bethany. I'm only going to do the first two verses of the triumphal entry. So I'm not going to cover the triumphal entry. So I'll leave the triumphal entry to Chuck. We're just going to basically say he's coming in. It's about as close as he is. But it's a good tie-in, so I wanted to cover like the first two verses of that. But I'll leave it to Chuck to cover the triumphal entry. So a lot of stuff there. So we'll start out today in John 11, verse 55. We'll primarily be in John 11 and 12. So in verse 55, now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. What was the Passover? What was the Passover feast? What's that? You got to know? You got to know. It was the Passover feast. Ironically, this is the Passover that comes out of it. This is the sacrifice of sacrifices that happens at this Passover. So what's the Passover? I like to ask the questions. I really think you could be in the church for years and years and sometimes miss key words and key things. So the Passover feast remembers.
When God passed over the Egyptians, the Israelites, when he killed the firstborn of the Egyptians.
That's it. Yes, the 10th plague. When God comes, if you had the blood on the door, if you did the unleavened bread, you ate the whole lamb, you had the blood on the door, he passed over that house, but the other houses lost their firstborn. So this Passover blessed God's people, those God's people who followed directions. And this feast is to remember that. And the feast is set up in Deuteronomy 16. And I'm just going to read a couple of these things. Starting in verse 1 of Deuteronomy 16. Observe the month of Abib. And as I went to look at when Abib is, which we know it's in March and April, it's a Canaanite name. This is a time when they were still using Canaanite names for the months. And I guess supposedly there's only 4 of them that carry over into the Bible. But later, after the Babylonian captivity, which is what Chuck and I covered for a big chunk of time, also, they start using Babylonian names for months. So Nisan, I think is what they call it now, or what the Jews called it after Babylon was Nisan. But this time it was Abib. It means nothing to the lesson, but it's out there for those of you who are attention to weird things. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night, and you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock of your herd at the place that the Lord will choose to make his name dwell there. What do you see, and as is set up in Deuteronomy 16, what do you see about the Passover that you know happens, especially this Passover? Those of you that already know the story, what do you see that are signs of things? Anything pointing towards the future? Some of the things that hit me as they're doing a Passover, but it talks about he brought them out of Egypt by night. When does the Passover start? As the sun goes down, right? As the sun goes down, that's when the Passover starts. It starts at night. So, and it commemorates God bringing them out of Egypt at night. The Passover sacrifice, it's to the God, it's to the Lord your God. It comes from the flock, from the herd. And we know that Jesus he's a Jew. He's one of them. Chuck?
They were saved by the blood and the flesh of the Lamb.
Yeah. But the Passover, and then this time, when it happens, Jesus himself being the perfect sacrifice, the ultimate Passover, it's his blood that saves us today. It also says at the place that the Lord will choose. So the Passover that we're looking at this account, where's the Passover going to be held? Jerusalem. So it's going to be at a place that God chooses, and that's where it'll be chosen will be at Jerusalem. Picking up verse 3 of Deuteronomy 16, you shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. For you came out of the land of Egypt in haste, that all the days of your life you may remember the day when you came out of the land of Egypt. So what kind of bread did they eat with the Passover? Unleavened bread. Bread with no leavening. What does that look like? Flat. Somebody said flat. It's flat. We agree that it's flat? Like burrito flat? Pita flat? Flat. Okay. No yeast. So it's going to be flat. We were looking at slides for the communion today, and you do a Google image search, and slide after slide after slide looks like the bread that they give you at the Outback or the Longhorn or something. It looks like these little loaves of bread that are not unleavened. But that's the common picture that's out there on Google image search. But no, they ate unleavened bread, so that's what they would have had. Why unleavened? Why no? Time for it to rise, right? Why throw it in there if it ain't going to do anything for you? So they weren't. They were going to take off when this happened, and it remembers that speed, that haste, with that happened. Really? Okay, that was worth bringing out today. Yeah, it was there. You're going to eat it. Okay. No, you're not going to feel stupid. Don't do that. There's a lot.
I heard about it so long, and I didn't just go ask, and now I hear that, and it's like, are you kidding me? Yep.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a ton of stuff. So, verse 4, no leaven shall be seen with you in all your territory for 7 days, nor shall any of the flesh that you sacrifice in the evening of the first day remain all night until morning. So not only did they not have leaven in their bread, they just didn't have it. It was all outside. 5 and 6, you may not offer the Passover sacrifice within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening at sunset at the time you came out of Egypt. So this is why it's at Jerusalem. It's not, it's why they didn't just celebrate the Passover at their own house. Why they didn't go down to the local synagogue and celebrate it. The men came to Jerusalem once a year to remember what God did for the nation of Israel. Those who could. Of course, it has to get trickier with the dispersion. It has to get trickier. how far can you travel to get there? So it gets to be a big trick. Big trick. Not trick, probably not the best word, but it gets to be more complicated than jump in the car and go. John 11, back to the text, 56 and 57. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so they might arrest him. So people are standing around looking for Jesus. Want to know, do you think he's going to show up? Do you think he'll come to the Passover? Do you think he'll make this trip? Because chief priests and the Pharisees got a arrest warrant out for him. Might even have a bounty. I'm not really sure. How do you think those guys justify the mindset? These people come to Jerusalem to purify themselves before the Passover. But in the ceremonial washings and such like that, their mindset is they're wondering, do you think Jesus will have the nerve to show up? So how do the chief priests and Pharisees justify this, do you think? They're the ones that caused this mindset.
Things back down again.
Yeah, he's got everything. I think that's probably about what it is. They look at him as raising a lot of concerns, a lot of getting people out of control, and they're going to settle this back down, back to the way it used to be. It's kind of like their plan, and that's probably how they justify it. They look at him as a troublemaker, and they look at Jesus as changing the law. So their own mindset is probably the fact that they are purifying the nation by getting Jesus out of the way. So, and we know the rest of the story, so that's not really the case. But that's probably their mindset they have and their own purification. Is their plan to kill Jesus a secret? It's not a secret anymore, is it? They've pretty much kept this to themselves, but it's not a secret now. They've put the word out. We're looking for Jesus. If you see Jesus, let us know. Posters at the post office. It's on Facebook. It's on the local news at 6. Right? It's on telephone poles. Seen this guy? Tell us where he's at. It's not a secret anymore. It's not a secret that they're planning to kill him. Everybody knows. Does that violate any laws just to kill guys? Yeah, especially when we know they go through. You think this is popular with the people? You think it's popular that they're looking to kill Jesus? Is that a popular thing with the people? The regular, common guy? Why not? They seem to love him, don't they? They come out in flocks to hear him. They come out in flocks for the healings. Alvin?
Performed by the man, and doesn't matter what the priests say, hey, this guy's a good guy.
Yeah, I think so. We're a long ways away from hearing that, but yeah. Say it again. Can you say it again? Yeah.
They were all witnesses to the miracles he was performing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that if you see someone being raised from the dead, or hearing, or seeing, or walking, you can't deny that. I don't care what kind of religious cloak you put over your shoulders.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of insight on what we're going to look at. A lot of these people had been witnesses to miracles. You know, he fed 5,000. So it wasn't just 5,000, it was 5,000 men. So there may have been 10,000, 15,000 people who ate the bread, who ate the fish. How many people did they see? How many people saw a blind man start to see? A guy who was sat for 35 years or so start walking. How many? It gets more and more. As this happens, you get more and more witnesses. You got more and more people who've partaken, you know. I like to think about the feeding of the 5,000 or the feeding of the 4,000. There's thousands of people who shared a kid's lunch. You can't quiet those people down. They know what happened. They were there. They saw it. So yeah, it's out there. We need to kill this guy. And there's a plethora of people who have partaken or seen this happen. Chuck?
They needed time to orchestrate the crowd. So when he came in on the fold, on the triumphant entry, they hadn't orchestrated anything. And so the general public was there seeing him come in. And those are the ones that had seen everything and believed in him, what I could see.
Yeah.
But when they had time to orchestrate everything, that's when they could pull in the crowds that would support them.
Yeah, they didn't
And I don't know how much of it was bribery or what, but they brought in those crowds to get in front of Pilate.
Right. They had to bring in a marketing crew, basically, and orchestrate it and set it all up to calm down what the common person saw and did. Brent?
One thing too is one of the accounts mentions about Lazarus that they're like, he's raising people from the dead. We can't even come close to that. It's
No.
you know.
That is absolutely one of the greatest miracles. He brings a guy back who's been dead for 4 days. 4 days. He brings him back to life. Like I said, people have seen it, and that's part of what we're getting to too. They've seen this. This cannot be a popular opinion. Like Chuck says, they're gonna orchestrate it, and they're gonna put the right people in the right places. But this cannot be a popular opinion at this time to arrest and kill Jesus. Moving on to the next chapter, John 12. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So this is where we're going to be, in Bethany. Will Jesus be at the Passover? That's everybody's question. What do you think? Going to be there? It's a big trick question, isn't it? Is this one of the trickiest questions I've ever asked? Okay. He's going to walk right in. He's going to ride in, yeah. So he's not hiding from somebody. His plans are to be there. Yeah. He doesn't quite live long enough to get to the Passover part, but he is the Passover. He's the sacrifice, is what it turns out to be. So it's kind of the trick question. Will he be there? He's going to be there, but not, it all unfolds, but he's there. It is the perfect time. You're right.
Back in December of their time, when he actually came, but he wasn't going to come, he said, "It's not my time. This is his time."
This is his time. He's taught, he's healed, he's trained the apostles, everything comes together. Like I said, that the ones who were mad about him being people see him as the Son of God, and then there are people who are mad about him being the Son of God. And this is all the perfect time. And as we know the rest of the story, that Satan thinks he wins by killing Jesus, but Satan loses by doing that. So it does. It comes all together perfectly. Ties in with the Passover, ties in with the saving of God's people with the blood of the perfect Lamb. Why do you think he stopped in Bethany? How far away is Bethany from Jerusalem? Anybody know? Close. Isn't it a mile and a half? I think it's a short walk. Walmart is probably farther away than Bethany would be. So, mile and a half, I think, is the magic number. So he stops in Bethany. Why Bethany? Why not just go into town? There's no room at the inn? Kidding. I don't know. But why not just go on into town? It's not time. It's probably just not time. And we'll see some of this stuff unfold here. Verse 2, so they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. How's Lazarus doing? Brent talked about he was dead, and they brought him back. So how is he doing now? He's alive. It's been a chapter later. It's been a little bit of time, though. He's alive. People eating with him? Yeah, and they're eating with him. So he doesn't smell like death. He didn't start, he's living and doing all right. This is somebody who came back from the dead, and we have an account that he's doing okay. He's doing good. I don't know if he's doing good, but he's back to life. So it's not like he raised him from the dead and it was a trick. Again, there's more witnesses of they ate with Lazarus. They ate with a guy who was a part of a miracle. A parallel account in Matthew 26. We're going to go parallel for a little bit and then back. Parallel account puts this dinner at the house of Simon the leper. I don't know why I kept changing his name to Simone, but it did. I know I changed that 2 or 3 times. But Simon the leper, or Simone to his French friends. And he was probably a leper that Jesus healed. He wasn't a leper. He was a leper. Is probably what the case would be. Because do you eat with lepers? Not if you can help it, right? So, what's that? You're kind of spoiled from that? Oh, spoils the meal. Yes, I would think it would be. What's that in your soup? Ugh. So, they don't eat with lepers. That's very common. So he is probably a healed leper, and a good possibility, although not concrete evidence. As a matter of fact, he's never mentioned anywhere but here. He is possibly healed. Probably, if he's a healed leper, he's probably healed by Jesus in one of the other miracles. So Matthew 26:6 says it is at his house. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, that's where this dinner happens. I would have thought that the dinner was at Lazarus' house, but it seems to be at Simon's house. Moving on to the next verse in both of those, John 12:3. Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. In the parallel account in Matthew 26, verse 7, a woman came up to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. There is another account of a woman washing Jesus' feet with perfume. That happens in Luke 7. I know I taught that as part of this series. I don't know how long ago I taught that. September? It's been a while. 2022. It was last year sometime. So, yeah, we taught that part of it. That one is an entirely different encounter. They're at the house of a Pharisee, I believe. The woman here she's actually poor. She's considered to be a prostitute by many. Her perfume is not nard. It's a different kind of perfume. She actually stands close enough to Jesus that she cries and gets his feet wet, and she tries to dry his feet rather than anointing him. Chuck? I think she's got something, but remember the study said it was probably floral and not nard. It was a cheaper thing. But yeah, she doesn't set off to anoint his feet. She's drying his feet. She's cleaning his feet because she cried on them. The stories are different, and I'm telling you that because the stories often get confused as being the same, and they're not the same story. So I'm just letting you know that they are different. Nard, and this is supposedly a picture of nard, but then again, I got it from Google image search, so it could be spiderwort that grows in my backyard. I have no idea. So this is supposedly a picture of nard. Nard grows in the Himalayas. Have we ever been to the Himalayas? No. I thought we'd have some kind of world travelers here who've been to the Himalayas. Doesn't it sound like a place you want to go? Anybody ever want to go? No. I used to think I wanted to go until I read a couple books about it. No, I'll pass. Just no. So, Himalayas, exotic place. Do you know anybody who's been to the Himalayas? Chuck does. Yeah, well, cool. I knew.
What do they call that? The first staging point.
Base camp? They went to base camp. Yeah, that would be I thought that would be a nice journey. I think you fly into Kathmandu and it's a hike to the base camp. I thought that would be a nice thing. It's a pilgrimage, as all it can be. It can't be any better than that when you know the conditions there. Don't think it's a Holiday Inn. It's not. So, what's that? Half star, don't recommend. This is, yeah. So for something to come from the Himalayas to Jerusalem area, Bethany, that's quite a route, isn't it? You just put the stuff on FedEx, you buy it on eBay and Amazon. Scamazon puts it on a plane, flies it over to Bethany, and here you are, you have your nard. Is that how it works? No. Goes through a lot of hands, right, to get there? Was it the Silk Road that goes from India to that area? Was that right? I think so. So it goes from dealer to traveler and it ends up. And you're going to have to collect a lot of these little flowers to make any perfume. So it's expensive stuff. What's the expensive perfume tell us about the social position of Lazarus' family? If you got expensive stuff, you probably got some money, right? They probably got money, and with money comes social prestige. So these are not just anybody. These are people who are of, like I say, social status of some sort. So they come from, yeah.
So it was a big deal.
It was a big deal when Lazarus died, yeah. Yeah, you can see the status of these people. And I guess really there's your key too, is it's not just some poor guy that died in the back of a poor village and was brought to the back. This was somebody that everybody knew. This is something that people came from afar just to come. And yeah, this is just one more clue as to why. It wasn't just, hey, something happened there and there's a plaque. This is a family of social status. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. What does it tell us about John, the author of this account? He's got a good nose. His nose is better than mine. That's really the key. What else does it tell you about that? So you're going to say about his nose. What does it tell you about where his nose was? His nose was there, right? He is an eyewitness. It's rare that would you record what something smelled like if you weren't there? Would you record how it just filled the room? Everything smelled of that, you know? Tell me the last good, oh, go ahead, Alvin.
People wouldn't even know what it smelled like.
They don't even know what it smells like. You're right, especially something rich, expensive like that.
There's not that many people know about it.
No, that's a good point. I wouldn't even know what nard smells like. I don't even know how you describe what nard smells like. Flowers from the Himalayas. What's the last good smell you had? What's the last smell that filled a room? Chuck's not going to say that, huh? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, smell of baking cookies is something that fills the house. I think the perfume industry misses the fact that if they had perfume that smelled like freshly baked cookies, man, they couldn't keep the guys off of women like that, you know? Bacon's another one. If you had the smell of bacon, you know, if you went looking for guys smelling like bacon, they'd be after you, right? Maybe that's why you don't. I don't need more men in my life. I'd get too much. Hang around your neck, yeah. Okay, anybody else got a good smell that filled the room and you couldn't hide from it? Bacon turkey, yeah. Yeah, Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving dinner is one of those smells. And it's a combination of stuff, but man, it just fills the house. We went to Mission Barbecue yesterday, and as I opened the door, you could smell the smoke. You could smell it. And the kids commented on the fact that the guy who was cleaning tables, the busboy, as he walked by, he smelled like the smoke that the meat was smoked with. He couldn't hide it. I'm sure when he went home, you know, the dog's like checking him out. So it was a good smell. Moving on to John 12, verse 4 and 5, Matthew 26, 8 and 9. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" And Matthew's account says, and when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." There are those who are detractors who will use these two accounts, although they're parallel, a little difference in them, right? They're not exactly the same. And those who don't believe will point out they are not the same. But those who believe, they have to be the same, otherwise the truth falls away. So who lodged a complaint? Who said why waste that perfume? It's worth money. Who? Chuck?
Other ones fall in line and say, yeah, why didn't that happen?
I think that's the account. I think Judas probably started it, and then the other ones are like, yeah, that's what's worth a lot of money. Why do this? You're right. John's nose knew it. Apparently, Judas's nose knew it was nard. Matthew's account, he didn't just point out Judas. It says in the disciples, because he was probably can't take himself out of this. He's probably the same thing, Hey, I don't know who started it, but I know we were all we jumped on it. He includes himself basically by saying the disciples, But anyways, the point is, that stuff's worth a lot. It's worth 300 denarii. What's 300 denarii get worth? Anybody know? Yeah, about a year's wages. Yeah, if you take one day a week off, the Sabbath day, it's worth about a year's wages. That's worth a lot of money. Realistically, it's worth a lot of money. If you're using the King James, I think it says 300 shillings. Just throw that out there. 300 shillings, a lot less, but 300 denarii keeps in tradition of what the text really says. John 12:6, I'll stop paralleling them because it's the same basically from here. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself what was put into it. So what motivated Judas? He likes nard. Yeah, the fox watching the henhouse. He is a thief. He has been trusted with the money bag. More money in the bag, more money for Judas. It's the old, was it the Bugs Bunny cartoon? One for you, one for me, two for you, 1, 2 for me. You can count it that direction, He could do that kind of thing. It's just more money in there for him. McGarvey's commentary, and I'll put it in here because it's a little different, but it's a singular thing that Jesus permitted a thief to occupy the office of treasurer. It's probable that Judas was honest when he was called to serve, but that same management and spirit of economy which made him fit for the place ruined him when he got it. Thus, our strong points are often our weakest. And I kind of like that last statement. I really don't like that last statement, but it's a warning for all of us too. Judas was trusted with the money bag because he was trustworthy. He was counted every penny, didn't just let it just go. But over time, he became a thief. He became interested in that money, and it says our strong points can become our weakest. And that happens sometimes. What we think is our strongest point can be our weakest. Why would they complain if she used the nard at his funeral? Oh, would they complain? If she'd saved that perfume for for Jesus' funeral, not Lazarus' funeral, if she had saved that perfume for Jesus' funeral, would they complain? Judas would have. He still would have. Actually, I didn't even read the verse. Verse 7 and 8, Jesus said, "Leave her alone so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." If she kept it for the funeral, Alvin?
Just held the money if they knew he was a thief.
Yeah, did they know he was a thief at the time, or
Thief.
He said he was a thief. John's book wasn't written for 60 years or 40 years after Jesus died. Does it get included at that point? Oh yeah, we knew that. We know the guy was a thief then. Was it at the time? Yeah, that's a good question. So would you complain? They're saving it if you save it for the funeral, none of them are going to complain. That's really what Jesus' point is. And we see this. What did they bring when Jesus was buried? They brought 75 pounds of fragrances and stuff, right? Is it 75 pounds that they brought to his tomb? People wouldn't fuss. So he says, just leave her alone. And the writing on that, as weird as English is, it says, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. One of the other accounts talks about it. It's a broken jar. They break the alabaster jar to get it out. So there really wouldn't be anything left. She couldn't save it back for later. It's all or none. And something that kind of hit me on this, and I'm going to say it's timely at least. For those of you who didn't know, Glenda Massey passed away last night. And unfortunately, what happens is we get to a point where we'll have a memorial for Glenda. If we had had a memorial for Glenda 5 years ago, 10 years ago, while she was still strong and teaching Bible class or making cookies and mixing double strength Kool-Aid with her hands, and it would been we would have gone all, it would just, what difference it would have been. But this is one of those things that it's here. It's and Jesus says, remember me and celebrate me basically while I'm alive. And that's the thing for all of us. Celebrate those we're with while we're alive. I think Dean Smith, what's his name? Dean, the Widowhood Workshop guy. Miller. Dean Miller, sorry. Dean Miller, that was one of his things, was celebrate people while they're alive. Celebrate your love while they're alive. And I think that's Jesus is saying right now. Let her put it on me now. I'm not always going to be with you. You can have that money for the poor, but the poor will always be with you. Matthew 26, verse 12 and 13, and pouring the ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, that what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So it's not a waste. It becomes part of the story. As we tell the gospel, as we tell the truth and good news about Jesus, what her sacrifice was, it becomes part of the story. And it's told today, on January 8th, 2022, in a room with orange carpet. The truth is there that this lady went all out, Mary went all out and put whatever she had to celebrate Jesus and prepare him for that sacrifice. So it becomes part of it. So it's not a waste. It's there for us. As we serve, as we give, as we put ourselves into it and not holding back. 12:9, John, when the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, and they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So how did the crowd find out? There's this dinner. Jesus is there, Lazarus is there, Simon the leper is there. How did they find out? Twitter? CNN? Chuck? Say it again.
Teleperson.
Teleperson. They told somebody, don't tell anybody, and it spreads. Everybody finds out. Right. They didn't interrupt C-SPAN and the 18th vote to let people know. It just, everybody knew, and they come. They want to see why. Why didn't they come? Because they want the good food? Man, I heard Martha's a good cook. No. They're coming to see Lazarus because, like I said, he was a man of social influence, but he's a miracle. But they're also coming to see Jesus. They are the ones whom love him as he loves them. They're coming to see Jesus. He draws a crowd. These people like him? Yes? No? People like Jesus? We've established this twice now in this class, right? You establish something twice is getting close to a fact, right? Do you think they gathered so they could alert the chief priests and the Pharisees who wanted to arrest and kill him? Let's all go so we can watch the drama. Somebody call the chief priests. Somebody call the Pharisees. Is that why they're there? No. Do they want to see that? Nobody wants to see that. They would form a barrier to keep that from happening if they could, if they knew it was happening. They do not want to see that. They are there out of love for Jesus. Verse 10, so the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well. There's always a great plan. Let's add another guy to the list. Because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. Brent brought that out. You bring a man back from the dead. If you saw that guy, you knew that guy, you knew him on the dead side, you knew him on the live side. It had to happen. You saw it. You saw that happen. You have to know Jesus is the Son of God. The Pharisees, chief priests, they hear. They know people are there. How's their reaction? We got to kill Lazarus too. We got to kill Jesus, but we got to kill Lazarus. He's no longer. They brought him back from the dead. He's not alive now, right? Take away that fact. But more and more people know he's alive. What had Lazarus done to deserve the death penalty? They're going to kill him. What had he done? What's that? He'd been raised. That's good enough for them, right? That's it. You went around talking. You can't keep your mouth shut at that point, can you? I wouldn't. That's the whole point. You can't keep your mouth shut. So they're going to make sure they shut his mouth. In verse 12, the next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. When is this verse taking place? The next day. So there's this feast, Jesus, Lazarus, Simon, big crowd. The next day, the large crowd came to the feast, heard that Jesus is coming. We hear he's coming. This is the next day. They know Jesus is coming. Who? Who is this crowd? The leaders? The commoners? Where did the large crowd come from? Where did this large crowd come to as we're coming into the triumphal entry is what we're coming to. They basically, the next verse will tell you in their gathering. Where did the crowd come from? Part of them came from Bethany. They'd just been at the dinner. They'd just been there to witness that. Part of them came from the town, and they're coming out to see Jesus. Same as they did for his healings and stuff. They'd come out of the woodwork because they knew he was coming. Zacchaeus and the tree. You know, it's this kind of thing. They're coming from everywhere. But a chunk of them just came from Bethany. They just came from seeing a guy that they know he raised from the dead. And in verse 13, so they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. So is this a crowd of people who love Jesus or hate Jesus? Love. Clearly, right? It's clearly a crowd that loves Jesus. Anybody think otherwise? Okay. I don't think so either. This is clearly a crowd who loves Jesus. What does Hosanna mean? Christy, give me the smirk. What's it mean? Any guesses? It's the meaning of, oh, Jehovah, save now is what it means. So anyways, we'll move on with this. Who was the original king of Israel? God. God himself was the king of Israel. They're saying here, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even God himself, which we know is Jesus. Pharisees had already decided not to kill him during the Passover because they knew the crowd would have a riot. I'm going to end with this right here. The crowd, some of these people gathered in Bethany to see Jesus and Lazarus. Some of these people had seen Lazarus through the miracle. They've seen and been part of Jesus' miracles. These people welcomed Jesus to Jerusalem. They're cutting down palm fronds. They're putting on a road. They're welcoming them there. They declare Jesus to be the King of Israel. They declare Jesus to be God. And it's coming up, these same people will yell, crucify him. Okay? Some of these same people who will yell, crucify him, are people who loved him, welcomed him, saw his miracles, partake in his miracles, and they will be convinced at a later point to yell, crucify him. And we're going to leave it right there. So thanks for being here today. Next week, I think Chuck's teaching. Chuck's preaching next week too. So that's the plan anyways. If that might change, it might not change. But that's the plan. So thanks for joining us.